Okay, well, welcome to our session on surrendering the mind and its desires. It's a subject that's so vast, and I'm wondering what's going to happen here. Like you, I don't know. I have an outline, and I have, of course, wonderful quotes from Baba, but I am really interested in also exploring psychology. Baba's words, he talks a lot about the unconscious and the subconscious. And, it's something that I'm particularly excited about delving into with you. And our format is going to be a little bit different than the Zoom sessions that I did last year. So last year, it was very interactive, and we did a lot of inquiry with the group. We're going to do an inquiry, but it's going to be short and it's not going to be interactive. What we're going to do in these sessions is I'm going to present, and then halfway through or whatever, we're going to open it up for discussion, questions, comments. And I'm really interested in hearing anything that you have to share, and just to have a discussion on it, because it's profound material. So I just wanted to be clear that this is a different subject and a different format. Now, Baba said that desires are endless, and the problem of happiness is the problem of dropping our desires. And has anybody noticed how difficult that is? I sure have. So Baba said, and everything I'm sharing today comes from the 7th revised edition of the Discourses. And at some point, I might be able to put together a document, and a Word document, and then you could download it that has all of these excerpts. But that might be a little farther down the road. So Baba says that the source of desire is to be found in the mind, which is on the mental planes. And I think that's very interesting, because I tend to think of desire as being something more emotional. But the seed of desire, the source of desire, Baba says, is found in the mind. So he says, here the seed of desire is attached to the mind. The desire exists here in a latent form, in the same way as the tree is latent in the seed. So the mind stores within itself the seeds or the causes of desires. Now, Baba also says that selfishness leads to dissatisfaction and disappointment, because desires are endless. And I'm really practicing watching my mind and noticing the desires that pop up. And I would love, in these sessions, we're going to be meeting every other Wednesday, okay? But I would love for participants to take time, every day, to just sit and notice the desires that pop up in the mind, and just witness them. You don't do anything about it, you just witness them. So Baba says that the soul is infinite and aloof from the mind or body, yet owing to ignorance, the soul comes under the sway of the mind and becomes a thinker. So we are not our thoughts. We are not a thinker, just as we are not our body. And so then Baba's telling us that in the domain of Maya, we think there's numberless individuals, but that's not true. We're all one soul, but we have these various sanskaras. And he says this is due to imagination or false thinking. Thinking becomes false because of the interference of sanskaras. The function of consciousness is perverted by the operation of sanskaras, which manifest themselves as desires. So he says, think seriously just for a few minutes and you will realize the emptiness of desires. Now, that is a power-packed statement. And I believe this is some of the most challenging work there is. And that's why I really wanted to spend time together just pondering Baba's words and discussing them and practicing. The function of consciousness is perverted by the operation of sanskaras, which manifest themselves as desires. And so Baba is saying, you will realize the emptiness of desires if you think seriously about it. The thinking of the soul cannot break through the hedge created by sanskaras, and consciousness becomes a helpless captive of illusions projected by its own false thinkings. I'm going to say that again because this is really important. Consciousness becomes a helpless captive of illusions projected by its own false thinking. So if you remember, when we were doing the Byron Katie work in the previous sessions, we talked about how our mind has projected. Baba says the mind projects the world, and the problem is that there's dust on the mirror of the mind, and our job is to get the dust off the mirror to find out that everything is exactly as it should be. So these are our sanskaras that make everything seem like it's not the way it's supposed to be. And I know this is a really big challenge, but if we're students of Baba's words, then we need to contemplate this. And so I'm also introducing a lot of Jungian concepts, and I've done that a little bit in the past, but Baba talked about the future of psychology and that there would actually be these, he even mentioned saviors who would bring forth awareness of how to lead an inspired life through some of these awarenesses that psychology has given us. And of course, the discourses were written getting close to a century ago. And I believe that there's a lot of great work that's been done up to now that can really support us. And of course, one of my heroes is Carl Jung, and he hypothesized that the unconscious must project itself to become conscious. Okay. Now, Baba says God realization occurs when the unconscious becomes fully conscious. So think about that. Here we are, we're projecting all day long. The mind projects the world. And that is how we're becoming conscious. So if our goal and our desire is to come closer and closer to Baba, who is complete consciousness, then we can accept the fact that we're projecting all the time. And what I discovered in self-inquiry work was that there's a way to withdraw the projections. And that's what I love because it's so practical. And so for example, I'm just going to give you an example from my own life. I'm really have nothing to hide. I'm just, another soul finding my way home, and we're all in this together. And so I have a sister who irritates me. And when I started doing the self-inquiry work, because I felt like Baba gave me a bridge to him through learning self-inquiry, because I wasn't ready to even realize that the unconscious had to project itself to become conscious. And I didn't realize that my mind was like a mirror projecting the world and that I had to take the dust off of it. I had read the discourses several times, but these words are like, they're just like such powerful capsules of information that it takes 700 years probably to internalize it all. So on a practical note, if I'm triggered by my sister, she irritates me. And what I've learned through these last 12 years of self-inquiry is that it's okay. Just notice what triggers you. If you want to be free, notice the triggers and then learn how to not react outwardly to them. We just become the witness. We become the witness of them. And it's the hardest thing to do. It's hard. I mean, just the other day, this sister called me and she hadn't spoken to me for a long time. And I had been reading about desires and, getting my outline and just really, this is my work, this is because I need it. That's why I do it. And so she's talking to me saying, oh, we have a love-hate relationship, but I love you and I want to, have a relationship. And I'm like, great, So I just let her talk and she went on and she started telling me all these terrible things about myself. And I just was with Baba and I just listened. I really listened to her. And then I just told her I was sorry for whatever I had done that had caused her sorrow. And she was so grateful. I mean, she said it felt so heartfelt to her. But my ego self really wanted to fight. I wanted to go, that's not true, because it wasn't totally true from my perspective. And then after the conversation, I really felt an internal shift because I feel like when we surrender our desire to be right, to defend ourselves, and we surrender it. I mean, I think about how Baba, do you remember the stories of how he would be falsely accused of so many things in the newspapers? And all he ever said was, it all helps my work. It all helps my work. He didn't really care what people said about him. So just remember, my first and foremost goal in these sessions is a practical outcome so that each of us can really find this serenity and peace in our hearts and minds through this awareness of what Baba wants us to do. And it's so hard, it's difficult. And that's why I think it helps to come together and we have each other to explore these ideas. But it only works when we put it into practice. Okay, so I want to get back to Carl Jung, and we're going to be exploring this a little bit. So he said the unconscious must project itself in order to become conscious. Okay, and Baba says, the mind rarely functions harmoniously because it is mostly guided and governed by forces in the subconscious. Few persons take the trouble to attain mastery over these hidden forces that direct the course of mental life. The elimination of conflict is possible only through conscious control over the forces in the subconscious. This control can be permanently attained only through the repeated exercise of true valuation in all the cases of conflict presented to the mind. So this is like what I was just telling you about my sister. I was able to, after that conversation, I was able to really feel an internal shift that felt more spacious because I had surrendered this desire to be right. And that's what Baba's talking about here. It takes effort. He says that few persons take the trouble to attain mastery over these hidden forces that direct the course of mental life. And the only way is through conscious control over the forces in the subconscious. So this is what we're working on, and Baba has it all laid out for us. And then he also says that 3/4 of our life is made up of ordinary things. And though conflict concerning ordinary things may not cause much mental agony, it still leaves in the mind a sense of uneasiness that something is wrong. The conflicts that turn upon ordinary things are rarely even brought to the surface of consciousness. Instead, they cast a shadow on one's general feeling about life, as if from behind a screen. Such conflicts have to be brought to the surface of consciousness and frankly faced before they can be adequately solved. Does that make sense? This is the shadow work. This is bringing up the elements out of the subconscious. And I will say, some of the criticisms that my sister had for me, I was able to see that there was some truth in it. It's very painful to see these elements within our own being that are not loving, and yet it's the only way that we can get through them. We have to witness them, and then we might repeat that behavior again that's unloving. But as we become more conscious and allow ourselves to be more and more in the witness mode, it shifts, it changes, and more freedom. That's what I'm experiencing. And I'm also noticing that that ordinary life that takes up 75% of our time is precious. You know, I just notice when I'm feeling centered and I'm doing my inner work, allowing the shadows to come up, I notice that the daily life of just chores, you know, cooking, being with family, friends, whatever it is, there's just something quite remarkable about it. And it honestly makes me think of the Mandali. You know, even though I didn't come to Baba until 2001, I was fortunate enough to meet about a half a dozen of the Mandali before they passed on. And I just noticed that they've been popping up in my consciousness a lot lately, because to me, they're such beautiful examples of living an ordinary life, an outwardly ordinary life. And that's really what allows this extraordinary inner life to flourish. So Baba says that knowledge of the soul may also be approached through a form of meditation in which the aspirant tries to realize himself as merely a witness of all physical and mental happenings. After a person wakes from a dream, he realizes he was not a real agent of the actions in the dream, but that he was merely a witness of them. If the aspirant persistently practices considering himself a witness of all physical and mental happenings that he experiences in wakefulness, as well as in dreams, he soon develops utter detachment, which brings freedom from all worries and sufferings connected with worldly events. Now, I used to think that if I became detached, I wouldn't care about anything, but it's not true. Becoming detached doesn't mean that at all. It just allows us to be more loving and to feel more compassion, because we're all actors on this stage of life. So Baba says to acquire control over thoughts is to become fully conscious of what they are. They have to be attended to before they are controlled. So we know that desires arise from the mind. The seeds of all desires come from the mind. And if we can all share developing this practice of just witnessing those thoughts, just watching them, not acting on them, and then we can support each other in our twice monthly meetings to realize that this experience we're having is pretty similar. We're all just having little samskaric variations of the same theme, okay? Baba has a lot to say about controlling the thoughts and controlling the mind. And I originally thought about making the title about the discipline of the mind and control of the mind. But I thought that people probably wouldn't be very interested in that. And yet it is imperative if we want to be free. We really, it's like we exercise our bodies, or some of us do, or some of us don't. But we also have to exercise the muscles of our mind. And when we learn to control these thoughts, that really are the cause of our suffering. Life just becomes the way Baba describes it. It can be pure joy and just all that's left. How can I serve? Just compassion. I don't have any desires. I don't need anything. And so I'm just here to support. I mean, I suspect that's what happens as time goes by. So another thing in the psychological realm, in depth psychology, so we know that the unconscious has to project itself to become conscious, and Jung was very aware of that. And then we can pay attention to, well, what am I projecting? Especially when we get triggered. It's like if you're enjoying your projection of the world, and one of the things that I love is nature, which is God's creation. Even though we see, dualistic things happening in nature where animals kill each other and so on, and the wind can blow too hard. But the goal is that if we acquire control over our thoughts, because I've done the work on the wind, the wind is terrible, blah, blah, blah. And now when the wind blows, it's not my preference, but I do feel detached. And then I'm just counting my blessings. Well, I'm grateful that I have this house that protects me from the wind. I'm grateful that we get fresh air blowing through the valley. So we just start noticing things in a different way. So another aspect of the collective unconscious, there's the personal unconscious and there's the collective unconscious. And Jung talked about the archetypes being very much alive in the collective unconscious. And I just want to focus on specifically one archetype. There are many positive archetypes as well as negative ones. Some positive ones can be healer, friend, teacher, mother, father. And of course, some of these can be positive or negative. But the one archetype that I feel is huge on our planet is the archetype of the victim. And we talked a lot about the victim in the last year's Zoom sessions when we were doing the work of Byron Katie. And we would always realize that the payoff for not changing our behaviors was because we think it's easier to just stay a victim. But none of us is a victim. And it's hard work to recognize that. And that's something that can come up daily too. Notice the victim thoughts. Notice when we want to blame, manipulate, defend, justify. Those are all subterfuges of the ego mind. One of the things that really compelled me to want to get together again and share is that Baba said regarding his silence in this Advent, he said that all talk in itself is idle when not acted upon or lived up to. And he said that was the reason that he maintained silence in this Advent, that there's been enough words, even though he, again, so generously gave us many more words. However, if we don't live up to the words that he's given us, we know that that's not what he wants. He just feels that if we're not living up to it, then what's the point? So I am making another renewed effort to live up to Baba's words and notice, where am I unkind? Where am I not being as generous as I could be? Our animal samskaras of lust, greed, and anger carry with us through our human evolution, and they become lighter. But, Baba says lust gets transformed into love, and greed gets transformed into generosity, and anger gets transformed into tolerance and patience. Now, that is my particular work. That's something that I have had to work very hard on, because I have had very impatient sanskaras. And And I do find that as I have worked on becoming more patient, even when I don't feel patient, it's really nice. It's just a wonderful way to live. So we're talking about the archetypes, and I want you to be aware of the victim archetype, and just notice it. Notice when those thoughts of being a victim come up, because this is the journey from unconsciousness to consciousness. And remember, Baba says, when we're fully conscious, God realization occurs. So this is a long journey we're on. Now, the thing about desires is they can be really subtle, you know, and I've noticed the desire to be heard, the desire to be appreciated, you know, those are the cause of suffering. And we did a lot of work on this in the Byron Katie work, where we would turn it around and discover, well, where am I not listening to that person? And where am I not listening to myself? And if you want to do more work in that area, there's 18 Zoom sessions from last year that have very methodically gone through the foundational processes of that self-inquiry method. And there's many downloads of Word documents to support you. There's a lot of material there. And so we're not going to be revisiting that in these sessions. So Baba says, thoughts cannot be controlled except through an appreciation of their value or lack of value. When the diverse thoughts that assail the mind are critically evaluated and the internal stirrings of sanskaras are faced, understood, and taken for what they are worth, the mind is freed from all obsessions and compulsions in relation to them. The disappearance of mental operations of all types contributes toward making the mind absolutely still without allowing consciousness to fall into abeyance. In other words, we still stay conscious. You know, like when we go to sleep, we're unconscious. We're with God, but we're unconscious, and our goal is to be consciously unconscious. All thoughts that appear in the mind of the aspirant are forms of perturbation and have their origin in the momentum of stored sanskaras. The agitation of the mind can disappear only when the aspirant can so control his mind that all thoughts can be ruled out at will. Only in complete internal silence is truth found. When the surface of the lake is still, it reflects the stars. When the mind is tranquil, it reflects the nature of the soul as it is. Well, I look forward to that. That sounds really good to me. So I think right now let's see, let me just check the time. Okay, so I'm going to talk for a few more minutes, and then I would love to just share thoughts, discussion, questions, anything that you would like to bring up. There's so many beautiful Baba quotes that I don't want to give too many, because I think talking about them is something that really is useful for us. But I see this one here that just is so beautiful. So Baba says, eternity is truth that has thrown off the mask of the mind. To discard the limiting mind is no easy thing. The chief difficulty is that the mind has to be annihilated through the mind itself. Intense longing for union with the infinite reality, as well as infinite patience, are indispensable in the process of transcending the mind. So to discard the limiting mind is no easy thing, but that's what our work is. And Baba takes on the universal mind when he comes to do his work every Advent. And then he discards the universal mind when he's done. But he works through that. And so our job is to discard the the limited mind. So we have to have patience and longing. Okay. So what I'd like to do now is to have a very short contemplation with you. And then if you have thoughts about it or questions, you can bring it up during our sharing time. And this is something we did do in previous sessions, but it just is ongoing work. So I want you to find someone where you have a reliably stressful, recurring thought that they don't love you enough. And this is just between you and yourself. We're not doing any, outer work with it. And if you cannot find someone who you have believed doesn't love you enough, find someone who you feel doesn't listen to you or who doesn't appreciate you enough. Okay? And knowing that we're all in the human condition, I'm pretty sure that everybody can find this. Okay. So we're just going to do this. I'm going to say they don't love me enough, and you can change it to suit you. And I'm not even going to go through the 4 steps of inquiry that we've done in the past. What I am going to do is I'm going to ask you, can you find where you don't love them enough, where you could love that person more? And like, I'm definitely thinking about this sister of mine. And I realize with Baba's help, I can love her more. I can extend myself to her more. I can be kinder. I can be more generous. I can be more thoughtful. And so I want you to just see if you can find where I'm not loving them enough. Okay? And then I want you to find where do I not love myself enough? And this is really important. We cannot leave ourselves out of the equation. We are God's creation, and we are love, and we are worthy to be loved, and we are worthy to love ourselves with all of our weaknesses. Okay? So I'm trusting that everyone has been able to find where I don't love myself enough. Okay? So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to close with a few more quotes from Baba, and then we will share. Okay. Baba says, thought has to be made use of in order to overcome the limitations set up by its own movement. But when it is done, it has itself to be given up. This amounts to the process of going beyond the mind. And this becomes possible through non-identification with the mind or its desires. He also says that control of the tendencies of the mind is more difficult than controlling physical actions. The fleeting and evasive thoughts and desires of the mind can be curbed only with great patience and persistent practice. And that's what our work is going to be for these next 2 weeks. We're just going to really take the time to notice the habitual tendencies of our mind with these thoughts and desires that cause us suffering. And all of these quotes are from discourses. And so if you just search the online, 7th online edition, you can read all of these words really easily. Baba says, though control might be difficult at the beginning, through sincere effort, it gradually becomes natural and easy to achieve. The mind, which appears feeble when it is wanton and uncontrolled in its functioning, becomes a source of great strength when it is controlled. Control is indispensable for the conservation of mental energy and the economical use of thought force, for the tendencies of lust, greed, and anger are removed through an appreciative recognition of the value of a life of purity, generosity, and kindness. This process of readjustment in the light of true values takes the form of what we call controlling the mind. This control is not a mechanical or forcible twisting of the mind. It is an effort of the mind to overcome its own inertia. It is fundamentally creative and not negative in its purpose, for it is an attempt of the mind to arrive at self-adjustment in order to release the expression of the true values of life. And I love that he says it's creative, because when you think about Baba and the mandali and, you know, the beautiful expression of love that comes through each individual, it's so creative and sublime, really. Baba says nothing is ever written on the soul. The sanskaras are deposited on the mind and not on the soul. The soul always remains untarnished, but it is only when the mind is a clean mirror that it can reflect the truth. When the impressions of good and bad both disappear, the mind sees the soul. This is illumination. So, and I recognize that that is quite a long journey, but I'm so grateful that every step on the journey makes life more beautiful and the way that is pleasing to him. So the mind surrenders its role of judge, which it is accustomed to play in its intellectual queries concerning the nature of the universe, and accepts unquestioningly the dictates of the heart. It's really important to end this session on the importance of the heart. All of this work on the mind is so that we are able to hear that voice of the heart that is alive within each one of us. Only when the mind accepts its ends and values from the deepest promptings of the heart does it contribute to the life of the spirit. Thus, mind has to work in cooperation with the heart. Factual knowledge has to be subordinated to intuitive perceptions, and the heart has to be allowed full freedom in determining the ends of life without any interference from the mind. The mind has a place in practical life, but its role begins after the heart has had its say. Spiritual understanding is born of harmony between mind and heart. So, thank you for your kind attention. And so now Diantha can open it up.
Thank you very much, Anne. That was really just nice to be able to just listen to you and soak it all in.
And listen to Baba. I mean,
Baba,
he's
yeah.
our inspiration. Yeah.
So I just wanted to remind folks that this is being recorded, but your videos won't come up. It's going to stay on, and so it'll just be your voices in the recording. So if you're comfortable sharing, that is fantastic. It's a pretty small group, so I don't know if we need to do raising hands digitally, but
whatever you feel, Diantha, just you're in charge here now. Go for it.
I'm tech support, so I mean I'll watch for hands being raised, but if someone wants to just start, I think it's going to be okay. I don't think we need to.
Yeah. So you can just jump in. Rosalie, was that your hand?
It is my hand. I didn't actually raise it yet. I raised it to my cheek.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would love to hear if anybody has any questions, thoughts, any insights to share. There's a hand. Go ahead.
Do I need to?
Yeah, I'm in the middle of a really big crisis right now. My son has been like your sister. I mean, he's just treated me with contempt for many years, and I'm not quite sure why. But you know, recently his wife had a baby, and so I became a grandmother for the first time. And so right after that, we had this huge fight. And I haven't seen the baby for 2 months as a result. And I guess what I'm left with is I just didn't know I had it in me to say these horrible things to him.
Yeah.
I was like, where did that come from? Why didn't I exercise more control? But I think it was just kind of the straw that broke the camel's back.
And Tina, that is the power of the unconscious. I mean, I see it in myself. Something pops out of my mouth and I'm like, where did that come from? But that's why when the unconscious, when we work with it daily, it does change. And of course, my thought, if you'd like to hear it, is with your son is to apologize.
Oh, I've apologized 4 times, and he
Yeah.
just keeps on
Yeah.
beating me up and
Yeah.
saying it's all my fault. He did nothing wrong. I'm a narcissist
Yeah.
and selfish person he ever met. And, so.
Yeah. So in my experience in that situation that I shared, and it really did work out, is when you have the opportunity to interact with him again, whatever he says, you just take it. You say, I'm sorry. It's like, it's an ego death. I'm telling you, because, nobody's ever completely right or wrong, but it takes two people to have a fight. And this is like a huge lesson for me because I was a fighter before I did the work of Byron Katie. I thought I had to defend my position. And it took me deep work and several years of training, intensive training in the certification program to really work through the need to be right and to defend myself. And I love that when I study Baba's words, his words corroborate everything I learned in self-inquiry. It's better to just let ourselves be dumped on.
I agree with you, but I didn't do that in this instance.
Yeah.
And now
you'll probably have another opportunity and you'll do better.
I'm just feeling like such shame that I allowed him to push my buttons.
So remember, I write on my website for the work that the biggest lesson I had to learn was to love myself. I had to learn to love myself. And I'm just inviting you, Tina, to just pour love onto yourself. We're all doing the best we can. Baba says that. Everything that's happened had to happen and no one's to blame. We just keep going. We just get up off the ground and we just go on. And there's nothing else we can do. It doesn't matter what's happened. We just keep marching on. And it's very difficult, but I can absolutely say that when I do that, my load gets lighter and I can feel that serenity that Baba talks about because I've surrendered a lot of my ego mind when I don't try to defend myself.
Yeah, I mean, all the 4 letters of apology were all about what I did and how I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
But he doesn't accept it.
Well, so again, turn it around to yourself. You accept it. You apologize. Now forgive yourself and just know that you're going to be ready because life just keeps bringing us I'm telling you, it'll come out of left field. And I get caught unawares and I still fall, but I just know that I have to keep going. It's like infinite longing and infinite patience. That's what it takes on this journey home. And believe me, our family members, they really show us where our work is. It's no accident that we're born into these karmic situations. And we don't need to know those karmic that we've shared over lifetimes. We just know we can do our part. So I love you, Tina, and I just want to give you like lots of encouragement to not dwell on it, because you've done the best you can. You've made your apologies, and just talk to Baba about it and trust that you're going to get another opportunity. And I know for me, it helps for me to bend over backwards, because my sister is hypersensitive. She's very sensitive, and it's a two-edged sword. And so I always used to tease her, when we were growing up. We're only 1 year apart. And, I just know that if I can surrender this desire to be right with her, I don't even know who I am. I'll be so free.
It's not the desire to be right so much, is I just don't want him to mistreat me and disrespect.
That's a desire, but that's a desire. We actually have to get to the place where, just like Baba didn't care when he was maligned in the media. I mean, Colonel Irani just bent over backwards to destroy him. And he's like, it helps my work. If your son disrespects you, that is your path to freedom. Baba says, Maya is the necessary medium for God realization. Welcome to Maya. I'm telling you, just notice, let him he disrespects me. Great. Where do I disrespect him? Where do I disrespect myself? And we just keep going on, because we are going home. We know our home, and we're returning home.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, Doug, I would love to hear from you, Doug. Thank you.
A couple of things have come up for me. One is I've been doing this work for a little while now as with Anne, and a lot of my work involved my marriage and my work with my wife, and it has improved remarkably. What's really interesting to me is watching how I'm able to more and more be in that place of egoless. Sounds a little grandiose, but it is something of that. It's a more vulnerable place.
Yeah.
And it's a place of really accepting responsibility for what's happening in myself and understanding where that's coming from more deeply. It's been really wonderful in our relationship, and it's affecting her. It's impacting her now that we have more of a graciousness between us that is quite wonderful. Interestingly, she has a sister who is like your sister, and we have to deal with her. We've had to deal with her a great deal, and so we both have that relationship that's been very difficult, and something is changing there also. I'm not sure that it's come from, well, I know it's come from work on both of our parts, but something in her sister is shifting as well. And when it happens, it's so magical. And the sense of getting out of the way, it really is wonderful. Putting myself aside. I had one situation with her, I'll just give a brief example. where we were in the bank trying to fix something for her mother, and she wouldn't give me her mother's social security number. And I ended up, I'm in this bank, I'm sitting in the couch in the bank, and I'm yelling at her, I'm sitting here in the middle of this goddamn bank and you won't give me her number. It was one of those moments of madness. And later I was able to apologize to her. And she, like your son, Tina, she didn't quite take it in the moment, but more and more she has accepted the apology. And for her, that's very important. It's vulnerable, it's exposing, it's painful.
Yeah.
Just,
It's an ego death, isn't it?
and you're eating your own ego.
Yes.
Baba says
Yes.
Really fell on my sword big time, 4 times.
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Doug. I really appreciate your sharing, because I think it's so important to hear people's stories, about really, I mean, this is hard work. It's shadow work.
Yeah.
It's the stuff that is below the surface. And yet, as Baba says, it kind of takes the joy out of life, because we always have this junk underneath the surface of our lives. And that's why it's so valuable to have a practice every day, to just be with the thoughts. I mean, I think self-inquiry is great. And I notice that maybe it's the creative part of myself. I'm just more eager to explore desire, which is in the mind. But I love self-inquiry, and Baba, even in the discourses, tells us to write down our thoughts. Diantha? I think you're muted.
Hi. No, I just wanted to chime in and say that this kind of work is what I do with people as a therapist, using CBT and DBT and also just deeper trauma work and all kinds of different ways of being able to control one's mind. And it's just, I just have to say, it's just so wonderful to hear it all wrapped up in Baba's words and shining so clearly in that way. It's just really, really amazing how much he said about the mind and about how to control it or make it disappear. And
yes.
Writing things down, he said like to just in the discourses itself, he talks about journaling or just bringing it to consciousness, putting it into words, the thoughts that you're having.
Yeah. And then along with that, when we're ready, that important step of just not speaking, just learning to zip our lip when we want to say something that's out of anger. And anger is a natural emotion, and it's important for our survival, but I mean, probably not as much today as in more primitive times, but it is a natural emotion. And Baba said he didn't want us to be a stone. He wanted us to feel anger. He did not want us to express it outwardly, though. So feel it. And the beautiful thing is, as you do that and you don't lash out, the next time it arises, it's not as intense. And this just keeps happening. It's a process, but we have to work at it. And I'm just feeling so grateful to have you here today to share with, because it really helps me to internalize Baba's words and to weave it in with psychology and self-inquiry. And Baba wants us, to keep being creative and evolving and learning to, how can we live his words? Yeah. Who else? Anybody else want to share? Well, we don't have to go, you know, we have an hour and a half if we want it.
I
And we,
don't think of the mind so much as, you know, in that Baba says he took us from sensation to reason. Reason was the perfection of sensation, and intuition will be the perfection of reason. So I'm not focused on the mind anymore, you know. So even to hear that word psychology,
yeah,
Jung, I like hearing Jung because I don't think that word, you know, but you know, right now I'm very, very totally nourished by Baba's mystical language, you know, just you know, it's just like some giant opening, you know, and it happened so long ago. I mean, he spoke in this mystical language during the Blue Bus tours. And, you know, what I like, one of the great things is, he says, you don't have to understand it. You just listen with reverence and read it with reverence. And that I could do, you know, and it's just so wonderful to feel in that way so deeply, because you know, I mean, I came in as a child and I would throw outrageous tantrums, and I've always been slender, so I look like kind of a little olive oil flailing, you know. I call it, you know, to give humor to it, I was very good at you know, horizontal flamenco, you know.
you were
And
good at what? What did you say?
horizontal flamenco. I grew up in
Oh,
Los Angeles, East Los Angeles too.
yeah.
But you know, I mean, along comes the pandemic, and I live alone. I like living alone, you know, and I came upon this in the mystical language. See me live in you in small ways of life. The everyday ritual of selfless harmony. Now, my reaction is, who but God could say that? Who but God could say that? You know, and then it goes on, and then the next line is like, the unsatisfied element in you is God, who needs you to be like him. then unsatisfied humor is God, when winning in you the dual show of I am the motive making I, to lift in I the truth. I mean, it goes on, but it's like, it's just so key, you know, to me, it's like better than words like, what did I use? Like sort of Buddhist, like they have a certain word for watching yourself, or it's just so key human, you know. And I thought, what a tremendous giving now, you know, to have this, you know. So and then one of the things it says, God is monotheistic, realization, reaction, and I am one in all. See me giving you the real order to resign in self-importance. I am in you, the truth creating you dual in humble ways of I.
Rosalie, is this from Norina?
This is through Narina, through
Okay.
Narina.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And
During-
I love
During
that.
the blue bus time, during the blue bus time, not
Okay.
not like in what came through her in the 40 messages. No, this is between 1938 and 1941.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
this is
you.
this is a mystical language. It's not, I mean, in
Mhm.
some of it, it's not the way we would use language. And I've been seeking this language of mine since I was little. I'm very attached to thinking I know how to speak my language. You know, it's used a different way. And I can surrender that it's supposedly the most executive way that God can speak. And I thought, I need to hear the quickest way now, because the world is, no one is to blame, but it's like total chaos and confusion.
And
and
Rosalie and the perfect masters are completely in control of this world. We have to remember that too. They've got it. You know that, right?
I don't think of the perfect masters.
Well, I'm saying when Baba's gone, I mean, he says,
I know. I mean,
it's always
like Avatar. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that, that kind of splits it for me. I mean, they all did their part. We're all doing our part.
But I love what you said about intuition, going from reason to intuition. And my sense is that some of us have samskaras, where we really love exploring, the mind. And so for me, I'm just like, wow, when I read Baba's words on the mind, I'm just like, it's just what I need. And yes, I think intuition is the next level. And it sounds like you're really enjoying being there. And so I applaud you for that. It's wonderful. And we're all where we are. And so, I know for me, studying this and then sharing it and having conversations really supports my own way of letting go of the desires in me that cause suffering in my life. And it's a work in progress. And yes, intuition is where we're headed. So, thank you for that.
Impersonal intuition. Yeah.
I did have a question about the quote about 3/4 of life is made up of ordinary things.
Uh-huh.
And they cast a shadow. They still, in other words, they still impact us a great deal, sort of in the background. It sounds like in the subconscious. Is that what that meant?
Yes, I feel that that's true. Baba talks about the subconscious and the unconscious in discourses.
Yeah.
And I was trying to actually get a clear definition just for this session. And, there is no clear definition, but I know because Baba talks about both. My feeling is that, they say that our conscious self is like the tip of the iceberg. And then below the iceberg is the unconscious. But I think the subconscious it just makes sense to me that it's closer to consciousness.
That's right. It's the next.
And those are the things Baba was talking about that diminish the aliveness of our everyday life. And I know exactly what he's talking about. I mean, I can sometimes feel there's something that I'm not really aware of, and it's impacting the way I'm feeling. And then I have the days where, everything is right. And, I just am eager to get to the place where I can be there. Yeah, but I would say it is the subconscious.
Yeah. It really struck me that 3/4 of life is made up of ordinary things.
Well, it's true though, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm telling you, especially now that I'm in my 70s, I just notice there's more effort in getting up and, you know, just doing the ordinary things to get ready for the day and to
Yeah.
do the chores, the cooking, the cleaning up, it's like when you're young, it just happens automatically. You have a lot of energy. And so I'm very aware that the ordinary things of life take up a huge amount of time.
Yeah.
And of course, it can include going to work and working. I mean, that's part of the ordinary part of life too. So for me, it's almost like a spiritual practice is to just be present, like when I'm doing the
Yes.
dishes, and just
Yes, that's what I
feel
was saying.
so joyful. I know that, Doug, when you were talking, that's sort of what you've experienced from delving into this
Yeah.
inquiry and questioning those things that troubled you. It's like when you really take the time, as Baba says, to just deal with the shadows, then life just becomes much sweeter. And it's not fireworks. It's not, you know, glamorous. It's not any of that. It's just heaven on earth.
Yeah.
And what can I say?
The other thing, Anne, about that comes to my mind is, you know, we're talking about different people in our lives that we struggle with in some way, that we're maybe in conflict with, and that goes on a lot in life. Struggling with other people, our partners, our family, our, you know, co-workers, and to begin to really understand that. I love this one line from Byron Katie, which is, there's only one person that needs to be happy in a relationship, and that's you.
Mhm.
That was like profound to me. And I've really taken that to heart.
And that's very much connected to the principle of staying in our own business.
Right.
We cannot make other people happy. And you know, when we go outside of our own business, I just saw how that's what keeps the world at this lower level of consciousness. Because if we're trying to fix the world or the people in it or make them happier or whatever, and we're ignoring ourselves, we're missing the point. Because God lives in our heart. Baba wants us to make room for him in our hearts.
Right.
And every time we argue, every time we have dissension, all of that, then Baba can't live as fully in our hearts, you know. I had this little couplet come to me when I was in Myrtle Beach the last time I was there. And it helps me sometimes. It's very simple. It's, when I remember to carry beloved God in my heart, like a cradle holds a precious child, then I know how to live this life.
Yeah.
And sometimes I forget. And when I remember, everything's different. You know, it's like we're carrying this Baba or God or love in our hearts, and it's very precious and it's very tender. And that's how we're meant to live. Yeah. Well, I just want to say, Andre?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. It's Andrew. I don't know. I didn't type my computer's messed up. Okay, it's Andrew.
Is
Hi.
this the Andrew with Diantha?
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, cool. Hi there.
Hi. I could just talk a little bit in general terms about my own experience about difficult people and trying to be that sort of witness, that cosmic function with difficult people. I have a lot of people like that in my family. So I could say that it's a long and continuous process with some people in terms of letting them vent out what needs to get vented out. You have to let people express something. And in this world that we live in, this devotional world where there's a presumption that you don't express anger, that's a doubly difficult process for us. Because when the conflict arises, like, whose job is it to say something, or what, how does it, we all have stories about our difficult family members or whatever. But then we look to each other for advice or guidance as how to deal with other Baba lovers. We're kind of helpless. I mean, we don't really fight amongst ourselves the same way, do we? So
I don't know,
food
because
for
I live
thought.
in Montana and I'm pretty remote. But I want to say one thing, Andrew. If somebody's really dumping on you a lot, one of the principles that of the work of Byron Katie, one of the foundational principles is the importance of an honest no. And it's a very hard thing for people to do. But it is possible to say no to someone, or to say, I need to leave now, or I need to, if they just never stop dumping. And to be able to say that without anger. And so I just wanted to insert that in as something that can happen, because we're not meant to just be doormats, and we have to take care of ourselves. Like with my sister, I was able to listen to her, and I was able to take it without it really hurting me, because I knew that it was like a gift that I was going to be able to get rid of some more ego, even though I wanted to argue with her.
Anybody's always at liberty to say, yeah, no, and try to do it in a nice way without anger. But if you want to resolve conflict, you have to let people yell at you sometimes or whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
And just be witness to that and hear them out. But
Yeah.
that's kind of an alien world to the devotees sometimes, or if it is, when it arises, it might come out in just unhealthy ways, because we're trained, there's a presumption of talking positively and lovingly, and that's okay. But talking, everything else is, it's I don't know what, there's a bit of an emotional pressure cooker that comes up with the bhakti kind of lifestyle. We could talk about that maybe in the next session a little. I'd
Yeah. Well, yeah, I would love to hear you. And my immediate thought is that, I feel like I'm a bhakti, because my husband and I chant every morning. He's not a Baba lover, but we chant to the other advents of the avatar. And however, I know what you're saying. I lived in ashrams when I was young. I've been to many spiritual centers, and there can be a repression of the shadow. And I think that's what you're referring to. And Baba talks about it, and he says, no, you can't repress it. We have to bring it up. However, if people don't want to do that, that's not our business. My business is to bring up my own subconscious and transform it, and to share with anyone who's interested. But it's not everybody's interest, and I have no issue with that whatsoever. It's just like Rosalie is living in intuition. I'm not there yet, so this is what I'm working with. That's helping me and inspiring me. But yes, I think there there are so many pitfalls, even on a spiritual journey, where repression and suppression happens. And, maybe in the long run, that helps people too. And then they get to the point where they realize that, that maybe when they're strong enough to deal with the shadow content, sometimes I think people don't need to do that because it would actually be too hard. It's almost like we have to have a strong enough ego to work on diminishing it. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah.
Diantha, do you have any thoughts? You're a therapist here.
About repression and being ready.
Well, but also about that some people might be too fragile to do a lot of shadow work or that kind of work, and so it wouldn't be appropriate.
Yeah, agreed.
Isn't that true? Yeah.
Maybe, yeah. It takes some preparation and as far as my work goes, I usually try to gauge where a person's at before diving into anything that's going to bring up a lot of emotions, strong emotions, or just a lot of memories that evoke strong emotions. So
yes,
that would be to just learn how to take care of one's nervous system that is just can be kind of wrecked. And so it's just on a psychological level, just learning breath work or learning what grounds a person or what can be soothing and relaxing, and doing more of that, and just getting to a place of just having the nervous system not always being in fight or flight and being in rest digest, so that you can digest these feelings and experiences in an appropriate, not just keep on in that fight or flight stance. So it is I think that it's a process, and it is about timing sometimes, but man, when it comes out naturally though in the world, and that's why I think therapy and containers like this are important and really helpful, because it's coming out maybe, and you're talking about it, or you're writing down your thoughts during the week and bringing them, but it's more contained. It's not like you kind of are less liable to spiral out with the thoughts, because you have people who can kind of see what's going on. So I think that that's useful to have that safe container. And but yeah, when it hits in real life, and it's just like the only thing to do is to squish it down and put on a happy face, and just not address it, or not, I guess if one is not ready to actually dig in and see why that's so triggering, or what's underneath all that, why did that set me off so much, that's deep work, and that takes safety first.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Doug, I'm wondering, because I know that you were was it a therapist? Was that your work? Yeah. I would love to hear if you have any thoughts on that. Just,
It's a great quandary question. And there's the phrase that started shooting around in the 80s, which was a spiritual bypass, where people would, sort of hide under the guise of trying to be spiritual and kind and open and loving, and inside of them they're raging and developing ulcers and all kinds of things. So that's a kind of a shorthand version of, I think, what we're talking about. But it's, in other words, it's very important that you recognize what you're feeling, that you're able to be with feelings, that you're able to understand more about where they're coming from, what's the history of this, and to be able to work with it, which means moving through it to the other side. That's sort of the goal, I would say. And it takes a lot of work. It seems to take a lifetime and maybe then some,
Well, isn't that what
Like
we're here
maybe-
for, really?
maybe a lot. So yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I know at this time in my life, you know, when you retire, you become more, at least there's the openness to become more interested in yourself and really go deeper with all of this. When you're working, that's such a focus in life.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful to have this opportunity.
Yeah. I do feel that that is one of the gifts of aging,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
that it's just easier to be introspective,
Hmm.
you know.
Even intuitive.
Well, I mean, by God's grace, sometimes I feel intuitions, but
Yeah.
not all the time, that's for sure.
No.
And Baba says, you know, the spiritual path, we have to take risks. And honestly, I did Zoom sessions in 2020, but I was kind of dragging my feet to get back and do Zoom sessions because it is a risk. It's like I'm putting myself out there, but it's not that big of a deal. And it's just so, I realize it's so nice to be able to share with like-minded individuals. And I find it to be very nourishing. So I'm just grateful. I'm grateful that, you know, we had this time together, and we'll see what happens in 2 weeks. I mean, I have no idea what I will present, but I always, you know, listen for Baba to guide me. So I just want to thank each one of you for being here and sharing today. And
Wonderful.
do you like this format?
I'm enjoying it. Yeah.
Yeah. I just felt like it would be nice to do a presentation and then discussion
Uh-huh.
instead of the whole, you know, so interactive throughout. It felt a little disjointed,
I'm
even
gonna
though.
stop recording now, just for everyone's
Oh,
information.
okay. All right. Thank you so much.